if I had to pick one painting to really perfect my Bob Ross skills, this would be it. Grandeur of Summer. It has 5 top things I think you should learn. Great sky with some clouds. It has a lovely mountain there, fir trees, bushes and trees, and of course, reflections. So, Grandeur of Summer, a classic painting you should be painting next. Well, hello, welcome back to the studio. Well, as you saw in my little introduction, Grandeur of Summer is a painting which, well, one of the paintings I was drilled on when I was doing my teacher training, because it gave me 5 key features which I needed to master. Skies, mountains, fir trees, bushes and reflections. And Bob also did a 1-hour TV special for this, so he took a little more time explaining it. Today I've repainted it for you, but I've adapted it slightly. I've moved things around a little bit and I've swapped in and out a couple of brushes. Bob's original painting was on 18 by 24 canvas, so he had a fair bit more real estate to play with than I've got. But this size is a 16 by 20 and maybe more suitable for your own particular home. So you know the routine. Sit back, relax, notepad at the ready, and see if we can paint Grandeur of Summer together and master those 5 key features of a Bob Ross painting. Happy painting, people.
So here's my canvas, 16" by 20, and the very first thing I want to do is to establish the horizon line. To do this, I'm going to use a 1" Bob Ross landscape brush to measure. At the base of the handle, I'm going to be using these map pins. I push one in this side, and I'll have one in the opposite side of my canvas. It's a quick visual reference to know where to position my mountain. This is a wet on wet oil painting technique, and the first thing I'll be using is some of this Bob Ross liquid white oil paint. I keep some in a small airtight container for ease of use, and I'm going to be using this, an old Bob Ross 1" landscape brush with a little orange tip on its handle. I want to apply a very thin, even coat to my whole canvas. You might also find it useful to do this in sections, one corner at a time. Before I start applying colour, I want to check and make sure I have enough on my canvas. It looks a bit on the thin side. Let's add a little more. As you can see, my fingerprints show through nicely. I made a detailed video all about liquid white. I'll put a link up here in the corner. Before you apply colour, finish off with some long flat strokes, and don't forget, dry clean that 1" brush before you try and add more colour. Here's my palette, and I've just got 2 colours to start with, phthalo blue and some titanium white. I'm using that same old brush, and you see me tapping well into the palette. I want to distribute the colour well throughout the brush and break up any heavy clumps. I start at the top corners of my painting and work my way across the top to meet the opposite corner, blending well as I go. As I work towards my horizon line, I run out of colour. I'll add some more. The top of your painting should always be a little darker than the horizon line. On your next sunny day, stand outside and look at the sky directly above you. It's dark blue. I want water in this painting, and for this I'm going to pull in long flat strokes from the edge to the centre of the canvas. But be careful, don't pull from the centre outwards. You leave a hard mark that's difficult to remove. Try and stay level with this. I keep pulling in and leaving a nice gap through the centre, maybe a nice shimmer of light on the water. Finishing off with some long flat strokes just to tone things down a little. If you've seen any of my other paintings, you know that I quite like to do a little bit of planning. I want to know where the mountain's going to be before I put a cloud on. I use the point of my palette knife just to scratch in the position. And as you see, if I want to change my mind, it's ever so easy to do. I deliberately position the point of my mountain slightly to the right of centre. Now let's paint some clouds. I use my fan brush and I load the corner heavily with titanium white paint. Now all I do is paint little letter C shapes, little curls of paint, always pressing into the canvas and pulling the brush towards me. I generally suggest starting off with clouds slightly smaller than you think they might be. That way you can always grow them a little bigger. Now, top tip, what happens when I push my brush as opposed to pulling it? It just takes off the blue, whereas pulling it just lays down a nice heavy amount of paint. I'll do a little time lapse and add another cloud or two. Now for a little blending, I've got a nice clean, dry, new Bob Ross 1-inch landscape brush. I want to use just these few hairs on the corner. I want to gently blend my clouds. Leave that top edge, that's the silver lining. It's just the middle and base that I want to blend out. You see, I've slowed my brush strokes right down. I don't overblend them though, because it ends up just looking, well, flat and uninteresting. I just want to soften the middle and lower edges and leave some detail. I'll blend these quite quickly as well. As you see, it doesn't take very much work to produce a lovely cloud. Top tip, it's always good fun to have one going off the edge of the canvas too. Breaking out of the edges of your painting somehow makes it look, well, a little bigger and grander. Now, time to paint a mountain. I've got my palette knife. I'm going to take a good amount of phthalo blue, black, Van Dyke brown and some alizarin crimson. Mix them well together. I'm looking for a dark navy blue colour. I think that's about right. There. Spread your paint flat, and we want to take a small roll of this, just a tiny bit on the edge of the palette knife. I start off by making a few marks. I want to know where the top peak is, and two other peaks, one to the right a little lower, and one to the left maybe even lower still. I'm going to join these together. At first I'm going to just do triangles. It's a nice easy shape. And then we'll come back and we'll just adjust them slightly. Here's the next little triangle. I'll join that on. And as I do, I want to think about how I leave the painting at the side. So notice I've drawn a little line to the left and I'll scratch out a little line over here to the right, maybe a touch lower. So it's just a sketch at this stage. Now, I go back in with my palette knife and scrape off all of that paint. This colour is just a stain. And the more you remove, the easier it is to make your highlights and shadows stick. I stand back from my painting and make small adjustments to the shape of this mountain. I think I quite like the shape I've managed to get. Now, let's blend out the base of the mountain. I want my mountain to be sitting on mist. I want it to look very far away. But top tip, don't drag too much colour down to the pins. Leave it all in the peak of the mountain. I think I dragged a bit too much down, but by adding a little bit of titanium white to my brush. There, I'll just blend out that little bit of extra grey colour that I didn't really want. Now, let's think about the shape of this mountain. I'll take the point of my palette knife and break the central peak into two. To the right, it's going to be in sunshine. To the left, in shadow. This is also going to be in highlight and shadow. Think about your mountains as being three-dimensional, not flat, with valleys and crests and peaks. Take time to plan your mountains. I'm just going to rub out those marks for my one though. For my highlight, I'm going to be using some titanium white. I want my paint laid very flat. I take a small roll, about the size of a matchstick. Now for one of the most important top tips you can have. Make sure your paint stands up off the blade of your knife in a nice neat roll. The blade of the knife won't actually touch the canvas. It floats on that little roll of paint. Now, handle well away from the canvas and notice how I just let the paint break as it comes down. Watch how my hand stays away from the canvas. As I turn to the right, I let my hand flatten out to the canvas again. Starting high and then allow the knife to drop to the canvas. This takes some practice, but the better at it you get, the nicer your paint will break. For the shadow side of my mountain, I take a small amount of titanium white and an even smaller amount of phthalo blue. You can see how powerful that colour is. What I want is 3 different values: a dark base, a nice bright highlight, and a nice blue shadow. Also notice that little tip there. I bump the white before I pull to the left. Once again, keep your hand away from the canvas and let the paint break. I bump the highlight to reshape my mountain. I'll do the same here. Just push into that little bit of white and then follow the lay of the land down and up into the other mountain peak. There. I think that little peak looks like it's throwing a shadow onto the big central mountain. Any small areas you want to get into, just use the short cut-off edge of the knife. Take time to play with these mountains, adding little touches of highlight and shadow. This peak in the background, well, I want to push it further away. I'll add some little snowy highlights here, and then I'm going to bring a nice blue shadow down in front of it. As Bob would often say, when you pick up a paintbrush or a palette knife, you have infinite power. In this case, even move a mountain. If you enjoy my tutorials, give this painting a little thumbs up. You can subscribe to the channel so that you know when I release a new video. Thank you. I want to soften out the snowy highlights and shadows at the base of my mountain. I follow the direction of the mountain. Bob would call it the lay of the land. Once again, I need a little bit more of a misty effect, so I tap my brush into some titanium white paint and just work it into my canvas, but I don't want to overdo it because, well, I'm going to try and put some more detail into my painting, and a big thick heavy white gob of paint, well, it's not so easy to make colours stick. My next top tip is all about housekeeping. Keep your palette well organised and cleaned. Once you finish with the colour, take a baby wipe and just mop up the surplus. In Bob's original painting, he created some nice soft background trees. For this, I'm going to be using some of that shadow colour with a little bit of sap green and just a touch of the original base colour for the mountain. I think that looks about right. Bob used a 1-inch brush for this, but it's a bit big for this painting. If you're on a smaller canvas, you might want to try using a filbert brush. I load it well with some of that colour. Now, let's try a few test strokes first. Just want to create the illusion of some nice distant tree tops. I'm going to check my colour. Maybe just a bit pale. I vary my tones a little and try again. Remember, this is distant hills and trees, so I don't want any detail, and I don't really want any strong colour either. I'm just doing little downward tapping strokes here. These should look like they're way off in the distance. I'm being especially careful not to lose all of that lovely mist behind that layer of trees. But I want some more of it, so I'll tap in some extra white with my 1-inch brush. As I build up more layers, so my colour wants to be a little darker each time. I want to make sure I bring this down to the pin line on the left here. I'll just add a little bit more. There. Of course, more mist. I'll combine this all together with some long flat strokes. One particular favourite of Bob's was some distant pine trees. For this, I'll use some of my base mountain colour and a lot of sap green and a fan brush again. This time, I want to just do some little sort of downward strokes. Now, I'm sort of running out of position here a little bit. I'm a bit lower than the pins, but it's okay. I think we can still sneak these in. I give myself a little line to stop me sinking any lower, and I'll put on just a few sort of markers here. Again, it's a little bit of planning in advance. Now, with a downward striking action, I just want to create the illusion of some little pine trees in the background. Once again, try and save some of that lovely misty area. Try to make sure you bunch these together quite well and just hit those little markers up and down. Not too regular though. They shouldn't look like a heartbeat. As you see, anything that sinks below that little dotted line is going to be a reflection. Where I have a tall tree above, I let the paint sink a little lower into the foreground. This is going to be the waterline, so you can see I need to make just a few small adjustments here. Now, let's use a fairly clean 1-inch brush. It's the one I was using to put all the mist on with. I dry cleaned it first. Notice how I give the brush a little wiggle and then a short flick. This gives me a nice sharp cut-off point where the shoreline is going to be. Now, as you get a little further to the right, the trees want to be a little taller, so I pull a little deeper into the painting. I keep it short in the centre to push that area of my painting further away. Now don't forget, dry clean your brush a little between each of these strokes. Otherwise, you risk smudging your painting. One last top tip, go across only once. For the waterline, I just want some of this sort of slightly grubby titanium white paint. Bob would use liquid white, but well, I find it just a bit too runny sometimes. Use firm pressure and just push the paint down into the canvas and slide the knife along. You're looking to leave just a little trail of white. Stand back and make sure they're level. Still water always lies flat.
Having gotten this far into our painting, it's all been very light and bright, but we're about to enter a phase of the painting called, well, the dark phase. The dark side. Sounds vaguely Darth Vaderish, doesn't it? All it means is we're going to be putting on a lot of dark underpainting, and the painting's going to start looking quite miserable, almost drab. But don't worry, you need those good strong dark tones there for the highlights to show up. As Bob would say, you need some gloomy days to make the sunshine seem all the brighter. So, carry on watching through.
Time for some dark then. I got a nice clean dry fan brush and I'm going to go into some of that really dark green colour. It's just the base mountain colour and more sap green. I want a nice fir tree. There. Mark the centre line first. Oh dear. I appear to have done what I always do and I've made it, well, lean in a bit, so let's straighten that up. I think that looks a bit better. Yes. Now, I want downward facing branches, so hold the brush over to the right, handle slightly down at an angle and just press on the canvas. Don't let the brush slide, just tap. Notice I always stay on that same corner of my brush. I flip the brush over occasionally, but I always stay on that right hand side. It's a mistake to keep flipping the brush left and right. Your trees end up looking, well, more like a cartoon kipper. I'll come back and make a few small adjustments. I want to add a couple more fir trees to the left hand side of my painting. Once again, I like to mark the centre line first. Now, it's about now that I realise that my brush wasn't working so well. This one is well worn. I think it's time for a fresh one. Now, if you struggle with fir trees, watch this carefully. Instead of doing the whole tree in one go, this time I'm going to do just the centre line. I use the corner of the fan brush and just give myself a nice dark centre. And I can stand back and then make some small adjustments. Add a few branches here, stand back, add a couple more, stand back. This gives you a little more control about growing the tree the right size. Not too wide at the top and finishing with a nice width at the base. To stop my trees floating, I need some land. So again, I'm doing a little bit of planning here. Time for some 1-inch bushes. Look at my 1-inch brush. There's a crimp on this edge and a rounded side on that edge. I'm pulling my brush one direction through that dark colour, rounded side first. Notice how I splay the bristles open and just look at the pattern I leave on the palette, all stippled. Also look at the shape of my brush. Notice how it's curved back from the rounded edge backwards. Rounded edge to the top. Think about a clock face here. Press 12 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 10 o'clock, and then round to 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock. Always pressing out from the centre. Here's it close up. Touch, press, but don't let the brush skid. Just press the bristles in and leave a nice imprint of the brush. I'll add some more here just to darken it all up, but again, I'm adding texture. I gave my brush a small dry clean and just grab a little of that colour and pull it down for a reflection. A nice big fir tree here needs a bit of a deeper reflection. I'll take it off the edge of the canvas. You might be tempted at this stage to actually brush across to create some reflections here, but don't. I want to do some highlighting first. I got the small fan brush I used for painting the clouds, so it's got some titanium white on it. I'm just going to go into some sand green and cadmium yellow. I load the brush very well, and now a little extra tip here, give it a little push. I want just a tiny bead of paint right on the edge of the bristles. Angle the brush again to the right hand side. Think about the direction of light coming from the right. Just touch these branches and see if you can leave a little touch of highlight. I think I need to reload my brush with a little more paint. Top tip, save the dark. It'll make your trees look more three-dimensional. Now to highlight the bushes, you want to use a brush which is fairly new and fairly clean. I think this one will work well. I'm going to go through various colours. Cadmium yellow, Indian yellow and yellow ochre. These are all thin, oily colours. I press my brush into the paint once again to leave a little stippled effect. It's the same technique as we used for applying the dark, but just make sure before you touch it to the canvas that the bristles are open and lacy and heavily loaded, but the paint standing up off the tips of the brush. Now, again, rounded side to the top. Just touch gently. Of course, I've got my big fat hand in the way again, as usual. So let's try that again. I reload my brush, rounded side to the top, and touch gently. Notice the canvas giving slightly under the pressure of the brush, and I'm pressing very gently. Don't be afraid to leave a little dark here and there. I'm going to sneak in another little bush just here at the water's edge. I'll add some here as well. Again, save some dark. It helps create a bit of separation. Now you see why I didn't bother brushing across my reflections until I've added a little touch of colour here first. There. Gently down. Just want to disturb the paint a little tiny bit, but just a tiny bit, and then gently across. But again, super gentle here. If you push too hard, it'll all smear together. Just one stroke is enough. I want a nice riverbank too. Some Van Dyke brown and black. I'll blend them together to give me a nice dark brown tone. I'm going to use a little roll of paint on the edge of my palette knife again. And between the bushes and their reflections, I want to just touch in a little bit of colour here. If you want to get into some small areas, just use that short cutter edge of the palette knife. It's a very useful knife. I want to add some highlights to this too. And for this, I need a marble mix of colours. So I've got that original dark colour, some dark sienna and some grubby white colour. It's got a bit of green mixed in with it, but I think it'll work just fine. Notice again, a small roll of paint. The dark black and brown colour is very sticky, and this little highlight should stick quite easily. I like to have one little bright rock. There, it really makes that little riverbank stand out. But don't fool with it too much because it will all end up looking very muddy. And of course, a tiny touch of titanium white paint for a waterline. Press, keep it level and rub firmly into the canvas. And if you get any little smudges like this, well, just use a dry palette knife and just rub it against the painting. You can correct any little mistakes. There. I think this fir tree needs a trunk. So I didn't bother underpainting it. I just picked up some of that nice marble mixed brown colour and touched it through the centre line of the tree. One final touch, and this is an important one. Add a few sparklers around these rocks to bring your painting all together. It's a neat little touch. I'm going to repeat the same process with these trees and bushes on the right hand side. I'll use a little time lapse for this. Let's do a little recap. I've loaded my 1-inch brush with some nice dark green colour, rounded side to the top, and notice how I press and push my brush into the canvas, but I don't let the brush skid. I just leave a nice textured dark shape. As opposed to this, well, that looks just like grass, very smeary, and the highlights just won't stick. This is why you need texture. I'll add some more texture around the base of the trees and down into this left hand corner. Before I try highlighting these bushes on the left, I want to look at the condition of my brush. The process of loading paint onto the bristles eventually causes the brush to clog and my paints to become muddy. So dry clean your brush and tidy up your palette. Don't ruin your painting for a few pennies worth of paint. A mistake I made far too often. Here's another super top tip. After you finish applying colour, gently touch the brush to a paper towel and knock off any dark colour that you might have picked up. This will keep your colours on the palette nice and fresh and stop them becoming prematurely muddy. Well, despite everything, I've managed to get this bush into a bit of a state. My brush was clogged with paint, my colours on the palette were, well, really muddy, and no matter how many times I try and highlight this bush, the mud just gets worse. If this looks all too familiar, then watch the next stage because I'm going to fix it. Of course, the only thing I could really do with this is, of course, take off the paint with a palette knife. Just remember, as soon as you've highlighted a bush once, you can't get another layer of highlight to stick until you apply some fresh dark green underpainting. The dark colours are thick and sticky, and the highlights are thin and oily and should stick easily. So let's see, did I fix it? Yes, of course I did. A few touches of highlight, and you'd never know I was in a pickle. This wouldn't be a Bob Ross painting without a few scratchy sticks and twigs, and of course I like to add a few little blades of grass using the edge of my palette knife. I just push into the lovely dark patch of colour. I think I might even give these a little seed head or two. Maybe they're nice grasses. There. I think with that, a little signature, we're finished. So there you have it. My version of a Bob Ross classic, Grandeur of Summer, based upon Bob's 1 hour special.
So there you have it. A lovely painting for a beginner to learn all those lovely techniques. But it's not the only one I've done. There's another lovely painting coming along right now. Why? Because it has 5 top things I'd want to learn. How to paint good clouds and sky, mountain scenes, fir trees, bushes and reflections. Make this the next painting you're going to learn. Hello, Henny. Hello, Henny. Hello, Henny. Yeah, who's that? It's Mr. Moon's Henny. Oh, yes, Mr. Moon's. Hey, Mr. Henny. No chance to get anything done around here, is there?